welcome everybody. This is the Evolution Security Podcast. It is a Saturday, a hot Saturday here in Oklahoma. You know, Oklahoma usually gets up to about this time of year, 100 to 102, and our guest, I'm sure, can appreciate temperatures like that, but so-called dry heat versus what we have here where it's like 100% relative humidity and 103 degrees, it sucks ass. So, it's a hot day, but I'm here in actually a brand new air conditioner I had put in a couple weeks ago. And man, it's nice and cool in here on a hot Saturday. And I get to chill out, hang out with a couple of my closest friends, my brother and Chris LePre. We have you on again, brother. I think this is episode 58 with you.
Yeah. I 50. What is that? 54 more than Cecil, right?
Yeah, he's probably never going to catch up to 58. So we will see. We've spent about a quarter of our episodes with you, Chris.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I truly appreciate the confidence you guys put in me, for sure. I love being on the show with you guys.
Yeah, you are always an awesome guest. And all joking aside, I mean, I think this is episode 6 with Chris.
Yeah.
And I think at this point you just might have the record.
Right on, man.
So
yay. lift him up on our shoulders and put him around like Ralphie getting an A+++.
Cecil's gonna be texting us when he hears this show.
Man, I know.
It's a test to see if he's actually listening to the show. We expect a text from you, Cecil. We're checking in multiple ways, making sure that you're listening and making sure that you care, that you have high episode count with us.
We love you, Cecil, by the way.
Yeah, we absolutely love him, but he does get a little touchy, man. I think he needs to lay off the testosterone just a little bit.
Or is it estrogen?
You know what? It could go either way with him. I'm going to pay for that. I know that.
I think we all will. Because I think for the record, he can tap us all out fairly easily.
100%.
There's 3 stripes on that black belt, last I heard.
Oh, it's awesome.
Well, guys, we called Chris on for a specific reason, and there's a couple of things, main topics we're going to talk about, but Chris has a lot of experience and a lot of insight into these topics that we're going to cover today. Firsthand experience with all of it. Now, I'll preface this by saying that I am putting together a highly civilian focused home defense with carbine class. And we may not necessarily go into, in this class that I'm talking about, the stuff that we're going to talk about here today, but it's still some things that I will at least have them consider. But what we want to talk about here is what it's like having to defend your home with a carbine and all the considerations that go into that. Now, Chris is a SWAT team operator, lieutenant, sergeant. I always get confused about your title, so give that to me again, Chris. I'm so sorry.
So I started out, of course, as a team member, right? Then became a team leader, which is the equivalent of like a team sergeant or something like that. I just didn't have the rank. Then I promoted to sergeant. Spent several years there as a sergeant on the SWAT team, team leader, assistant team commander. Then I retired as a lieutenant about a month and a half, 2 months ago, over the team as the team lieutenant.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it'll be nice, even if off the air, to hear about how that retirement is going and how that came about. Because I think Eric might share with me that we're kind of pissed. This is the first time we've heard about this, and it's sitting here on the air.
Well, full disclosure, I was tracking that he was retiring. I just wasn't sure when.
So just so you guys know, I'm still with the agency in the reserve capacity, meaning I'm still part of the training division and stuff like that. I just don't get paid for it now, and it's kind of on my time instead of having to punch a clock every day.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you love doing it anyway. It's kind of like me practicing guitar, dude. I would play the gigs I play for free. It's nice getting paid. It's nice getting paid, but I certainly don't get paid what it might be worth. I don't know, but that's another topic. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here.
All good.
So we often, all of us know, you for one, being a law enforcement, you've been an instructor, firearms instructor, etc. But we know that, right, lots of firearms instructors are ex-LE, ex-military, and a lot of them aren't able to really relate to civilians. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, man.
Yep.
And so I just give the example of one class from an LE guy I had. Now this isn't the only class, but I did do some stuff with a local FBI SWAT guy and then a local officer that taught a class that he just taught all these civilians all this stuff that wasn't applicable for me. It wasn't applicable, and then he never explained what it was applicable for to begin with, right? So my point is, this class, right, is to be focused and very not to be very applicable to the civilians. So we're coming at this from that point of view. So what I wanted to first ask you about, Chris, was the time period when SWAT operators were running MP5 submachine guns that ran 9mm versus coming into the time period where we are now, where it's unheard of to have a sub gun and everybody's running usually M4s of some type. But what was that like, that culture change, and why it happened? And, just give us some quick insight into that.
So just a little bit of history, man. If you really look at the history of SWAT, not that this is SWAT centric, because I know we want to drive in on the civilian side, but in the 60s and 70s, when teams started forming, whether they were known as SWAT with LAPD or SRT or ESU, whatever the names of the organizations they were running, originally most of them started with rifle caliber weapons platforms of some type, whether it was M1 carbines, some guys were using like M14s, all these different guns. And believe it or not, the Colt AR at the time, or the SP1, I have old Colt ads from like I think the oldest one I have is 1963, and it shows like your typical city cop, the old folded brim hat, kind of hip fire in an M16A1. So that was the original kind of start with special operations teams and law enforcement, as they were carrying rifle caliber guns. But what changed was Operation Nimrod with the SAS, because guess what they used? They freaking went in there, they'd eliminated all these terrorists with the MP5 submachine gun. And we all know that sometimes gear doesn't make the man, but gear certainly improves the look of the man, right? So they all look, hey, we want to be like the SAS, and they went and were able to neutralize all these dudes with the MP5, so that's what we need. And that was right around the transition where you started seeing cops go away from rifle caliber weapon systems to submachine guns. And then late 90s, early 2000s, we had the LAPD shootout, where those guys were clad in body armor. They were using shotguns. And LAPD was using, I don't even think they had pistol caliber carbines. They were just shooting their regular Beretta 92s. and they get up there, and guess what? They weren't able to penetrate the body armor, and these guns were limited. You know, of course, you can make shots beyond 100 yards, but realistically, they're 100-yard gun and in. And I think they took a hard look at like, hey, what do we need to be able to penetrate armor, whether it be soft armor, hard armor, and then also some pretty forward-thinking people were like, hey, let's do a ballistics comparison and see how a 9mm out of an 8.5-inch barrel penetrates a structure compared to a 5.56 that penetrates a structure. And lo and behold, guess what? The 5.56 penetrated a heck of a lot less than 9mm 40 and 45. And then they kind of took a step back and said, hey, man, for those of us that are going into single wide trailers, probably a lot smarter to carry a 55 grain hollow point bullet that's going to fragment pretty quick compared to 147 grain, which was the common bullet weight back then because subsonic for MP5 SD, realistically, that's penetrating multiple layers of drywall and stuff like that. So that's really where the transition happened. I happen to be right in the middle there. I originally started with an HK53, which is a 5.56 MP5, but those things were so beat up they wouldn't run reliably. Then I went to an MP5, and in 2006, I think it was, we got a bunch of Colt Commandos, 11.5-inch 5.56 gun, and man, we haven't looked back since.
Well, so that's awesome because we want to make very clear a lot of people don't understand that a rifle caliber can be. Now, we're not talking about full safe. We're not talking about safe. We're
Right.
talking about slightly safer when it comes to over penetration and multiple walls, etc. In other words, it's not, you don't blast away. What we're talking about now, we're going back to the aspect of the concept of using an AR-15 type rifle as your home defense weapon. People just need to understand that it actually is not blasting through a lot of walls like people assume it would be, yet it's still a little bit better than 9mm. I wanted to make that clear, and the fact that you went through that change, and one of the reasons why the change was made is because of the ballistics.
100%.
Well, and I'll add, I think all of us have heard the folks that, you know, are on the internet or on forums back when folks were on forums. I'm dating myself a little bit. Frankly, I kind of miss some of the forums, the good ones. But anyway, about the incredulous person that wants to blast folks, or you'll over penetrate with that AR, you know, you need to use a pistol, you know, of course, not completely understanding the
physics,
ballistics aspect, the physics of it. But for our audience out there, I know we've spoke about this before, Chris, but can you tell the audience what rounds you're running, what you guys prefer to run through those 11.5-inch rifles?
So we're running a 64 grain bullet. Sorry, guys, my dogs. We're running a 64 grain bullet, and we were running the 55 grain TRU, federal TRU, which we had great results in. With that round, it would pretty much break up upon contact with anything solid. Like, let's say a vehicle windshield, you had to put multiple rounds in the vehicle windshield to get those rounds to actually penetrate. How indoor stuff in houses, we did some particle board testing and wall board testing, and you'd probably get a couple of walls through, but you're not going to get 6-7 walls through with like a 9mm or 45. We were running the 64 grain Winchester Ranger, and now I think we just switched over to the 62 grain Spear Gold Dot, which both have very, very great terminal performance.
So, and they're barrier blind?
Yeah, they're barrier blind. Still nowhere near the penetration as say a 9mm. But we also, like our counterpart, so we're a regional team. The Casa Grande Police Department guys are running, I want to say 60 grain or 62 grain. It might even be a little lighter than that. I apologize for not knowing exactly.
Oh, that's okay.
Top round. It's a Hornady tap, and that's specifically designed for indoor stuff. where it's not going to overpenetrate, which has also had phenomenal results. And as a homeowner, if you are worried about that, then that's an ideal round to look at. The critical defense or critical duty, either one of those two is a great round to carry in your gun.
Well, so now that we've kind of established at least where part of my thinking, and Eric, and I know, Chris, you probably agree too, is that to me, when you shake out all the variables and how it is to run a shotgun, a pistol, and then a carbine, to me, the carbine is, with 5.56, is the ultimate home defense weapon. It because of it being easier to run for more people versus a shotgun. Now, I know people may disagree with me on that, but I just know how much easier it is to get people that I know how to run an AR, where they're pretty intimidated by 12 gauges.
Yeah, so that's a huge point, right? Even though Joe Biden endorses the shotgun for home defense, it's not ideal. Number one, because the recoil impulse, trying to take a small frame female, small frame male, and be like, hey, let's go outside and shoot 50 rounds of buckshot today or 50 rounds of slug today, you're going to completely turn them off to shooting that gun, right? Especially smaller frame people. You even have big people that don't like shooting lots of rounds through a shotgun. I know I don't want to go to a Rob Hot class and fire 500 rounds of freaking slug and buck over a day and a half, 2 days. It's like going and getting a hammer put into my shoulder every couple of minutes, I think the 5.56 provides a lot of benefits in the fact that it's very soft shooting, right? It's easy for people to utilize as far as I pick it up. I have 30 rounds or 20, depending on what you want to use, 20 or 30 round magazines on tap. So that means I'm going to have to hopefully reload a lot less. And I can do stuff with it that I can't do with a shotgun. I know you can buy suppressors for shotguns. I understand that. But realistically, I can take whatever can you want to use and put it on the end of an 11.5-inch gun, whether it be a rifle, short barrel rifle, or a pistol. And now I have muzzle blasts. Basically, I can control that muzzle blast so it's not as bad for, say, people who are also blast sensitive. And there's a lot of people out there that do not enjoy shooting because they're just blast sensitive. Matter of fact, Cecil's daughter, she is very blast sensitive. When he was trying to teach her how to shoot, we had a conversation. I go, dude, I guarantee it's the blast from the 5.56 that she doesn't like. He put a suppressor on the gun, and from what I understand, she actually will go shoot with him now with that can on there. So that's a huge thing, right? A pistol, I mean, in the end, it's still a pistol, right? Yeah, 15, 20 rounds on tap, maybe depending on the gun. But in the end, it's still a pistol. It doesn't have the capability to stop as quickly or incapacitate. It's harder to shoot. I only have 2 points of contact if I'm lucky, compared to 3. And I mean, it's just it can be, again, recoil sensitive depending on what I'm carrying, right? Like a female that's, again, small stature, and she's shooting hot 9mm duty loads. And I know some dudes that don't want to shoot 147 plus Ps or 147 duty ammo through a gun all day at a class. Never mind somebody who's learning just to defend themselves, because let's face it, guys, a lot of people who want to have home protection will go out and shoot, if we're lucky, once a month, maybe once every 6 months. So what they're going to deal with is that gun. It has to be pleasant for them to enjoy the experience in order to actually understand that they may have to use it someday. If I'm just out there pounding on them, they're going to be like, man, the last thing I want to do is grab this thing because it's going to hurt me.
Well, so and then again, just circling back, the very fact. So we're talking about this rifle cartridge that, let's just say, rule of thumb, has about 3 times the kinetic energy of a pistol round, yet is less of a concern for overpenetration. So again, that's one of the focuses I want to have here. So now, where SWAT techniques and tactics are applicable to civilians, you as a SWAT operator, you've done, if I recall, it was pretty common that you would do an operation a couple times a week. And so you're in and out of homes and trailers and stuff like you said, to locate individuals. A lot of times it's drug traffickers, human traffickers, organized crime, etc., gang members. But you have the experience of, quote, clearing structures. But before we go into the actual concepts that people at least need to be exposed to, let's explain how dangerous is it for someone to move through a structure trying to clear their house when a bump in the night occurs.
So I'm going to touch on 2 points very specifically, and I think you guys will agree with me. Number one, solo structure clearing, whether it be a house, apartment, commercial building, office building, whatever you want, is the absolute most dangerous thing you can do by far. You live in a 360-degree environment, and there's only one of you, right? Realistically, your average person, even maybe your above average person, their max capacity to be able to cover successfully is 90 degrees. Once you start going outside of that 90-degree angle, I'm opening up my scope of vision where I can't concentrate on more than one thing. If it's within that 90 degree, I would even say a little tighter than 90 degree, more probably 60 degrees. I can visually see everything. I can have access to it. As soon as I start going outside of that, I'm dependent upon my peripheral vision. And guess what happens? Depending on lighting, where I'm looking, stuff like that, that closes down, what angles I'm coming up on in the structure. So it is by far the absolute most dangerous thing a person can do. And I know we had this conversation on another episode. It's not something I endorse, right? But there may be exigent circumstances. Somebody breaks into your house, you have kids on the other end of the house, your wife's on the other end of the house during dinner time, and you're in the bathroom. Who knows? There's always exigency that can produce that you weren't expecting. And that's where the techniques of clearing your house come into play.
So we just want to put a fine point on that individuals that purchase a firearm and their instinct. Here's what we're talking about, guys. We're talking about instinct, not training, or at least considering what can go wrong or what you need to do right to be successful. But that going and clearing, like you said, clearing is the last thing you're going to want to do, but unfortunately, it's one of the first things the novice gun owner or shooter would do in the instance of a bump in the night.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes, I do. And I'll also say this, like, I think it's better to put it in perspective for a deputy or deputies to go and clear a structure more so than like a SWAT team, right? Because the concepts are the same. I have to cover my angles. I have to look at, people's voids, open doors, closed doors, stuff like that. But deputies and some city agencies too, they go and clear houses. Sometimes I know it's not advocated, right? It's like, oh, you have to have a minimum of 2 people. Yeah, try that in the county I work in, out in the west part of the county.
Right.
The backup's 30, 40 minutes away. You're going to clear stuff on your own. With a SWAT team, and Aaron, this is probably the police officer that you took the training from. This is probably where his separation from understanding what you were looking for compared to his knowledge, right? That's a dude that's going into a known confrontation, possibly with a radio. So he's got instant access to somebody on the other line that can come and help him, right? Do you have that? If you're clearing your house, you're probably not on the phone clearing your house, right? Yeah. You're probably like, I have to do one thing really well at a time, so I can either call 911 and barricade myself in my room, or I can hang up my phone and clear my house so I have max attention where I'm looking. So that's where there's, I think, a big offset with cops, man, is we get into this mentality where it's like, hey man, I'll just get on my radio and I'll call for like our code was 906. I need 906, and that's a backup code, right? Send me officers now. And usually, especially with a SWAT team, I'm going into a house after maybe two guys sometimes. I have a whole team with me, right? I have freaking 20 dudes with machine guns, full body armor, helmets, night vision, pistol, gas, less lethal, medics, negotiators. And we often forget that, like, hey man, you waking up in your house in the middle of the night at 2:30 a.m. It's you, maybe you and your wife, maybe you, your wife and your dog, or you and your dog, or you and your kids, whatever. And you're also still half asleep trying to figure out, like, yep, hey, was that crash that I just heard? Was that me imagining something?
Yep. Or a dream?
Yes.
Yep. That happened to me just a few days ago. Yes. Where I had to ascertain that. Yep.
Now you're in that, as Eric called it, kind of like that cloud of war. Hey, you're in that OODA loop. What part of this OODA loop am I in? And where, as a SWAT dude, I know, like, hey, we're going after a bad guy. It's probably a homicide suspect, drug dealer, something like that. My guys are all at peak performance. We know what our mission is, and we're focused, right? We may be tired, but we know the mission. We know the plan. There's 20 other dudes with me, compared to the homeowner who's like, hey man, I don't know, honey, did you hear that? Yeah, I think somebody's in the house. Now guess what? Now they have to orientate to that, and their adrenaline just spiked. Okay. And that's why I think as a fault of our own, SWAT guys will be like, well, I can teach you to clear a house. Well, I'll tell you what, I think a patrol deputy that does it day in and day out as a solo guy can probably relate more, because I know when I was a solo deputy out in the west part of the county, my radio didn't work, right? I had to do the Eiffel Tower to get radio.
Because you couldn't get to the repeater?
Yeah, exactly. And then if I had backup, it was, if I was on a good day, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we've all rolled on some mats, right? Imagine doing a 10-minute round, full fucking bore fight. You don't want to do that, right? So you going in, clearing a house, you're using all your senses. You're like, hey man, is this dude really in here? And now you're thinking, I'm by myself. I don't have backup. I have my empty hand skills and my pistol, maybe a carbine. Back then we didn't have a lot of patrol rifles and stuff like that. So again, I get off on one of these tangents that I told you to keep me on track on.
No, it's good, man.
I really think the lone patrol deputy or the small city cop that does it day in and day out can empathize more with homeowners compared to a SWAT team.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking SWAT, man, because I lived and breathed it for almost 20 years. It's my pride and joy, and I love it. But in the overall scheme, I think the patrol dude that works alone all the time is a better reference.
For, in other words, they might be a good choice when it comes to taking a local class.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So we've established that clearing our home or going out in our home with our firearm, thinking that we're going to be just successful based on, hey, I'm prepared. This is my house. I've got my firearm. I'm going to go out there and be successful. We're establishing that is a myth. But at the same time, we're starting now in this conversation where it's unavoidable that person needs to go out through their house with their firearm. So now let's talk about the things that person needs to at least be aware of, that they can start researching now or looking for a class in this. But what are the things that, as just a normal person with a firearm, they've probably never thought about. And let's just kind of go down the main list of concerns when it comes to fighting in a home structure.
So number one for me, and this is whether it's a patrol deputy, a civilian that's in his house. I hate the word civilian. We'll call him a citizen, right? Because we're all civilians.
Yeah, cool.
Good point, man.
Citizen of this country. He's in his house, or a SWAT team operator, all the way up to the highest tiers of the government, right? Information processing, I think, has to be worked and has to be studied and has to be emphasized, because if I go through a house, and you guys have both seen it in AMIS and other classes you guys have taken, I can take a person who's never been exposed to that level of stress and go, okay, go clear this house. And you put somebody inside the house that's in a room, doesn't have to be like in the center of the room, but just off in a corner that's maybe a little shaded. And that person will go through and their eyes will be as wide as they can, and they will completely bypass that person in the corner of the room because their brain is not registering what they're seeing. They're looking, but they're not seeing. So I think, especially for you, Eric, Aaron, if you're going to do some kind of structure clearing with your people, put things in the room that you want them to see. Maybe a small letter right on the wall, and just tape it to the wall. And they go in and they clear the room. They might have some furniture in there if you have the ability, ideally, because you don't want sterile rooms, where they go in and they come out and you go through and go, okay, hey, I just had you clear 2 rooms off the beginning, right off the bat. What was the letter on the wall? And they're like, what letter? Well, that tells you they didn't see it. They looked, but their brain was so overwhelmed that they weren't able to process the information that was going on. And we would do stuff like that in training, just to get guys to have visual, like, decision making. Hey, what was that? What was that? Another thing, and this is a little bit of advanced stuff, but what we would do it with our guys is we'd go into, if we had a big enough room, if not, we could do it in a room like this, take 3, 4, 5, maybe even more if you have them, if the room's big enough, portable target stands with IPSCs, and put a letter, a number, draw a gun, paint hands, like hands up on the rest of the targets, and go, okay, I want you to go in there and find the bad guy and shoot him amongst all these staggered targets. But also you outline it and say, utilize, this is what I would do. I'd be like, utilizing the 4 firearm safety rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Identify and deal with the problem that's coming up however is appropriate. And what happens is you'll see guys go in the room and they'll see the bad guy and they'll be like, pop, 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 right? But you have a target behind it that's kind of offset, where they actually have to understand, like, hey, if I shoot through that target, I'm potentially shooting another person. So it gives them 2 variables that they have to deal with. There's my bad guy, but I have to open up my vision to see what is also behind it, because that's part of the 4 firearm safety rules, right? Know my target and what's beyond, also vertical left and right limits. So if I come in and I go to shoot him and I'm like, there's a person behind, might be your kid, right? It may be maybe your wife had a baby 6 months ago and the crib is in there and this dude came in through the kid's bedroom. Do I want to start shooting a bad guy with my 6-month-old baby behind? No, but if I move this angle, I got a clear shot all day long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the kind of processing people have to get to in order to understand how dangerous structure clearing really is.
Well, Chris, can I add something to what you're stating here? And one of the things that I love about what you're enunciating here is, number one, you are describing using some of the most basic tools, right? In my opinion, let's just say you're using one room, like you mentioned, and you have cardboard targets. You're making props. You're making decisions placed into those targets of angles, shoot throughs. Are you covering people with a muzzle that you shouldn't be covering? All of that. And there's 2 reasons I'm bringing this up. Number one, that's not a lot of resources that folks could have on hand. But more importantly, that is a lot of shit for people. Because I was about to tell you, bro, you can cuss on this show if you want to. That's a lot of shit for people to process. And that's why I'm trying to drive home this point of how dangerous it is.
Yes.
And how much it takes to do it well. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, most people I mean, I haven't done that type of training in a long time myself. And so I know how stressful even just the training can be. And let alone, folks that just think I'm prepared. I know where that room is. I know I got it. I'm being a little facetious. I know I got to slice the pie, this, that, and the other. They think that they understand when they really don't understand. And I'm right there.
Yeah. And I didn't mean like, when I say put multiple targets in, man, if you're facing 5, 6, 10 dudes in your own house,
Yeah.
you're gonna lose.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that's what you meant, but I want to reiterate to the audience, it is simply to understand how to process information,
Right.
and make your brain process faster. Right.
And I guess and even though I had that in my mind, I'm glad you brought that back up, because yes, totally understanding you're inducing decision making. Right. Yeah, that would suck if you came into a room and you're completely outnumbered. That's a bad day.
Yeah. And just to digress just a hair, your average homeowner, right? You guys, myself, my family, my friends, cops, right? Minus cops and military guys, and to a point, sometimes even more cops than mill guys. Your average American citizen doesn't deal with that level of violence on a daily basis, right? Now, let's take it back the other way. Your average bad guy is a predator, and
Excellent
he
point.
is making decisions every single day, whether he's looking for somebody to rob, somebody to rape, a house to break into, a vehicle to break into. So they are conditioned to be aware of their surroundings more than Susie Homemaker, who's going to the store to buy her groceries in a really nice neighborhood and coming home to her house. She has an alarm system, maybe has a dog, has a husband, has a couple of kids. So when that stuff happens, they are overwhelmed. But the bad guy, he's been here 100 times, maybe 1,000 times.
So a good way to put that, right, is this is your first tryout jiu-jitsu night, and they throw you in and you got to roll against a brown belt.
Well, let's call it a blue belt, because blue belts are trying to prove something. Brown belts are the old guys that are just like, hey,
well, in other words, you've got no experience. You're going to get someone that has experience, right? And
yes.
you don't have much of a chance. It's they just have to understand that that's the level of difficulty.
They have the calmness and chaos because they've been there so many times, where you, myself, who don't deal with that on a different daily basis, or who doesn't even mentally prepare for it on a daily basis, right? I would say that you guys probably in a couple of times a day, like, yeah, man, I need to do this because if somebody breaks into my house, or, hey, where's my gun at? Because I'm 3 rooms over from my gun, or whatever, or, hey, is my alarm set? You're constantly reevaluating your safety protocols, we'll call it, right? Where the people who've never been exposed to that are like, oh, well, you're paranoid. I have an alarm. And then boom, guess what? The alarm goes off, the window gets smashed, and there's somebody in their living room, and they're like, conditioned black because they've never thought about it. Those are the people that I worry about, that we were talking are just going to get a gun. They're going to go fire 5 rounds, because not only are they just going to get a gun, they're going to get a revolver and 357 Magnum, because that's what the guy behind the counter at the gun store told them to get, and run these 125 grain plus P 357 mag rounds through it. And then they're just going to come down to it, and it's going to be complete chaos for them. And that's what we, as a society of instructors, and this goes out to anybody that listens to the show, where I know Cecil's on board, but some of these really high-end guys that you guys have had on here, that is ideally our goal, is to get people to make really good decisions, really fast decisions, and have that mindset of, I've been here before, I can deal with this problem. Because the bad guy's going to get a vote, right? It's just who gets to vote first.
Yeah, bare minimum, and that's why we're talking about this right now, is exposing those of our listeners that maybe don't consider these things. Literally just being aware that there are things that you haven't thought about is starting to at least win part of the battle of knowledge, and I'm gaining knowledge. So where I think that's a good point to go into some of the other issues, like now going back to rifle setup.
Can we touch on one other thing real quick that I didn't mean to veer away from, but
okay.
You also talked about the point where you are absolutely forced into a position to do this. So let's just talk about that real quick.
Okay.
Rifle setup. Because at that point, and again, we've talked about this on the other episode, that is not a clearing problem now. That is in extremis single person hostage rescue, right? Which is even worse than building clearing by yourself. At that point, I need to get from point A to point B to secure that area absolutely as fast as possible. And guess what? You're probably going to have to blow by a bunch of doors.
Yep.
And sometimes grabbing your carbine and your bag that you keep in your room, or your plate carrier, chest rig, bandolier, whatever, the best option is grab my carbine and run absolutely as fast as I can to where I need to be and hunker down and strong point in there. Right? Because at that point, my priority becomes my kid, my wife, my baby, my dog, whatever. Hostages are always number one on the priority of life, right? So at that point, they are number one, and I just need to get to them. And if I can successfully run by this guy while he's in ruffling through my office drawers and he's like, what the hell was that?
Good
and
point.
Now I'm strong pointed with my kid. Guess what? I've just won that.
Because excellent point.
You know
and
what I mean?
Excellent visual.
One strong point in there, and I've won. I can replace my gold watch. I can replace my guns. I can replace my ammo. You know what I mean? But I can't replace my kids, my wife, my dog, whatever. So that's where the difference is. One is like, hey, I'm kind of searching to check out what the noise was. The other one is, I am an absolute stimulus that I need to go now, and I need to get there to secure it. So.
Yeah, and again, we talk about this all the time about how the mental cues that folks hear are important and can save folks' lives. That's why we bring up the strong point fairly often on this show, because we want people to hear that. And it could mean the difference between, okay, it's my wife and I, it's just me and her in this house. I don't have to go through this home right now. Strong point, I've already created some cover points inside this room. My wife has her plan where she goes to, and I won't talk about on the air because you know what? That's our plan, right? Not, that's OPSEC, but she has her plan, and I have some specific functions inside that room, and that's where we're going to stay. She's going to call 911, and I'm going to man the high ground. And, I just think it's important for folks to understand that if you're in that particular situation, that's what you should be doing, And again, to your point, getting to those loved ones. I don't have children, my wife and I, anymore in this house, but back when Nick was across the hall, guaranteed that was a part of the plan, was to secure him. And that was the plan, was that my wife would be on my tail. We would get to him and we'd strong point in his room, which actually was the better room to hold the high ground in that specific house. But anyway, back to you, Chris. Thanks, buddy.
No, I'm good, man. Aaron, does that kind of touch on where you wanted to go with that? You can go on a setup.
Oh, excellent. Yes, certainly excellent. So again, we're talking about using a carbine as a home defense weapon. And I bet you we can all agree on these simple three things. Once we've established we've got our reliable AR-15, we're just going to focus on ARs, guys, because it's easy. That's what most people choose as a carbine anyway. So they've got their carbine. Now, once they've got that carbine, the first thing they need to do is get a sling, then a weapon mounted light, then we can talk about an optic. Am I right, guys, in those priorities?
100%.
Yep. Can't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people will say, "Oh, get a red dot or a LPVO first." No, a sling, then absolutely a high power white light, because I can't shoot what I can't identify, right? Because the last thing you want to do is come out and go, "Hey, there's a shadow down my hallway," and you just burn down your kid or your wife. You know what I mean?
God,
so
Lord
getting
have mercy.
that sling, so you've got your carbine version of a holster that helps you keep hold of that if you do get in a tussle, and it just gives you a way to hold it when maybe you've got to your baby boy.
Yes.
You can put that sling and put your rifle kind of in between your arm and your side, etc. However you feel comfortable. Just an example of storing your rifle when you're not needing it on your person. But so this is where I want to go into, and I will say, right, guys, we still suggest that once they've gotten that sling and that light, then yes, we highly recommend you getting a red dot or optic for your rifle, because it is much easier to run a red dot than it is irons, especially with people with older eyes.
100%. Yeah.
So let's go into the concepts, at least some considerations using weapon mounted lights. One of the main things that I consider, but then go into lighting concepts, though, is does SWAT ever use the technique of using white light splash to illuminate a room or targets?
When you say white light splash, are you talking about
Reflecting, being in a low ready and reflecting a light off a wall and or the floor, etc., instead of pointing right directly at an adversary or target?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Especially like in a stack, you might get one guy that'll just go boom. He's, especially with today's modern lights, man. Your average size house, your average size rooms, you can put a white light down at a floor or even down like the first quarter of the wall, and it illuminates the whole room, right? So you just come in and you're like, okay, I got plenty of light on this. We do that all the time. Guys will come up, you'll be moving through a structure. Guys will just come up and they're waiting for the squeeze to go in the room, and they're holding light on the walls to illuminate it. I'm hunting while those guys are working behind me, right? I'm looking, okay, all right, good. I'm not seeing anything that's catching my eyes. Then I get the squeeze and I'm still going in the same way. So yeah, that's absolutely a viable tactic, 100%. I'm a firm believer in, once the light is on, the light stays on.
Okay.
Need to turn it off, because
Interesting.
What you get is guys will come in and they'll splash a room, and then they'll look for their next point where they want to move to, and they'll turn the light off and move. And it's like, okay, not only have I given my bad guy a second or two to move, but I've also given up situational awareness, what was going on in that room, right? So my big thing is, light comes on. If I have to pause for a second and kind of look where I'm going, I'm using that light. Okay, that area over there looks clear, and I'm just going to move across to that safe point where my back's up against a known. And then from there, I'm still searching. I'm getting visual input because the light is allowing my eyes to gather that input. Then I'm picking my next point where I'm moving to. Now, if there's two of us, that's even better, because one guy can illuminate, one guy can move. We're always moving in that L shape, right? Two-man tactic, still moving in L. Light on. One guy's got one light. Guy's got light on. Guy's moving outside of the cone of light, and he's invisible, or he's more difficult for his opponent to see. That dude, if there's something that is outside of this guy's vision, this guy can illuminate it, and then this guy can move to a position of advantage, and they can continue to bound
You just took the words out of my mouth. It's like indoor cover and move, man, bounding with two men. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. But again, going back to single man, if you watch like nighttime civilian shootings or officer involved shootings, guess what they do? A light comes on, they shoot, and then they look at where the threat is if they hit it, and they finish it there, and they're like, okay, this dude is down. They don't do the fancy like strobing technique like I'm at a rave, you know. It's just not reality, man. When people, Eric, you've been shot at, when people start shooting at you, what do you want to do? Where's the rounds coming from, and how do I eliminate that, right? And that's light goes on, identify my threat, shoot it, make sure it's down. Okay, now we can take a pause, render aid, do whatever we need to do. And if I'm able, turn that light off, go to a white light, handheld, something like that.
Excellent.
Again, another tangent. I promise. I apologize.
No,
what's
great.
That again?
I said another tangent. I apologize.
No, that's great.
I don't think they're tangents at all, Chris. I mean, you're giving our audience some excellent understandings, and no tangents on our side here, man. That's great.
So, what? Now, you mentioned blasting past doors.
Yes.
Now, there's definitely the issues that often people get training in structures, and there's often the concepts of where the doors are along a room's wall. Do you think that is a concern for civilians, or what would you say about that concept? You know, maybe delve into it just a little bit.
Sure.
And first off, do you think it's something that civilians should really dig into? And then second, yes or no on that? Or, but what does that look like for SWAT members or someone, instructors that's actually getting paid to be there?
Okay. So number one, again, if you don't need to, don't do it. Right. But we're all alphas, and we hate to use that word because it's so commonly used today. Right. But I'll tell you right now, if something goes on in my house tonight and I'm asleep and I wake up and I think it's bad, I'm not going to hunker in my bedroom and call 911. It's reality. There's reality, and then there's ideally, right? I'm going to go start peeking around, seeing what's going on in my house. But I also have dogs, so that could be an alert too. As far as doors go, right? This is another common mistake I see, and I'm not judging. I don't want any instructors out there to come back and go, hey, those guys from EvoSec and that idiot Chris, they were trashing an instructor. No, I'm not doing that. I'm giving you my experience as a SWAT dude, my experience as a patrol deputy, and my experience as a person who studies this also as a citizen, not just as a cop. As you're moving down a structure, like in my house, in this house, I have a tubular hallway that goes, so I have a split floor plan. I have my master bedroom at one side, living room, kitchen, L shape into an office, another L into my garage, and off of that is a long hallway that goes to 3 other bedrooms and a bathroom. So if I am systematically clearing for whatever reason I have to do it, and I come to a door, right, and the doorknob is on inside, meaning closest to me, I am going to open that door, throw the door, let it breathe. We call it let it breathe, right? Because what happens when doors get open? Stimulus to start getting bullets through the door, right? So we call it let it breathe. Hey, let the door breathe, take a step back. So at least if the guy shoots through the the first 6 inches of the wall or so, I'm offset. So I can be like, hey, I'm out of here and turn around, or I can push through if, God forbid, some reason I need to do that. I'm going to open the door myself, throw the door, let it breathe. If the doorknob is far side, I am still going to reach across, open the door, and push it open and step back. And the reason I say that is because it is safer, I believe, to do that than to cross the threshold and turn my back to 4 unknowns compared to 1 unknown. And I see it a lot where guys will teach, okay, I'm going to cross and I'm going to put my back to a whole bunch of unknown areas so I can reach this doorknob easily. Well, guess what? At least if I'm with my hallway, the way it is, I'm within that 45 degree of span. I can control everything. Okay. And that's how I'm going to systematically work. It's no different than 2-man patrol tactics, 3-man patrol tactics, or a full SWAT team. So we waiting on him, or are we going to keep going?
Yeah, you go ahead, Chris. Matt's at a good reason. Something was an emergency.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm going to systematically clear that to my advantage and never turn my back, if able, to an unknown threat. If I have to turn my back to an unknown threat, I'm going to minimize every single way of maximizing my own safety, right? I'm going to minimize my threat zone and I'm going to maximize my own safety. Unfortunately, if we come to opposing doors, I just may have to pick one.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm
Pick
going
your
left.
poison, right?
Yep, I'm going left. Maybe pause, see if you can kind of get any kind of stimulus. Is to, hey, am I hearing something left? Am I hearing something right? Does this room smell like the sweaty tweaker that hasn't showered in a week? I think he's in here. You know what I mean? So those are the things that I really think people don't think about. They just say, hey, just start clearing doors. And the best way for me to open this door is to turn my back. Yeah, but you're turning your back on. For me, if I was coming down my hallway and I come to my first door, I'm turning my back, which my doorknobs are far side. I would be four potential rooms. And because I have more rooms than I have people living in this house, most of my doors are closed, right? Thankfully, because now I'm dealing with closed doors. But if I had one closed door, let's say, and 3 open doors, that's a really bad situation to be in. So, understanding that, hey, if I, like, when guys are going through these courses, think what's logical. Go, if I turn my back to open this door, I'm crossing the threshold. My back is now facing an area I haven't cleared. I'm facing a cleared area. Why would I want to do that when I can reach across, throw the door, step back, let it breathe, see if anything changes downrange, see if I hear anything down in this room, and then I can systematically clear. And guess what? When I come out, I have to clear dirty and I have to clear clean. Okay. Meaning I come out, this way is the way I came from. So this is technically the clean side. This is the way I'm going. So this is the dirty side. So I'm going to come into the doorway. We'll use this little square that you guys see me in as my door. And I'm going to come out and I'm going to clear dirty, clear clean, back to dirty. All I'm doing is making sure nobody came in behind me. So that's technically single man building clearing, if you want to call it, but there's so much more in depth we could get on it. But those are, if you can keep your back from threats, limit your exposure to 40, 60 degrees, preferably 45 or less, and open doors as needed and let them breathe before you make decisions, which includes smell, sight, hearing, then you're ahead of, 90% of the population who's just going to go door to door and not think about the tactics behind it.
Man, this is excellent stuff. Now,
Aaron, if I could ask Chris to give for our audience, I know the setting is difficult, but I think you're doing a great job, Chris, of giving folks that are watching this and or listening a good understanding of some basic and or I think some more to the point, some fundamental, and some of this advanced. But let's say you have, okay, once that door's open and you've got a deep corner, can you describe how you deal with that now open door and a deep corner within, say, that room? So you've got the open door. How do you approach that if you've got to clear that deep corner that you cannot get eyes on at that point?
So center fed or corner fed?
Corner fed.
Okay, so corner fed, ideally the door opens and you're looking at the long wall, we'll call it, right? So there's a whole bunch of argument for, like, it's like underwear, man. It changes all the time. I can slice the pie, which is a tried and true technique, okay, for basic building clearing. I can cut the pie, or I can step center, look deep, and then I'm going to have to start slowly moving in. In a SWAT operation, as soon as we have let that room breathe, I want to be through the doorway as fast as possible to the deep corner, okay? And that's where that information processing comes in. If I come in, I hit the deep corner, and I process information faster than my bad guy, I'm probably going to win it, okay? But I, again, using this as this little frame here that you guys can see me in as our doorway. This is my long wall. I'm going to come in, and I have my deep corner here. I can press in, or I can step in and advance. It's shooter's choice, right? Personally, I'm going to step in and move, because that's the way I've done it all the time in SWAT. It has to be, I have to clear that entryway and get to my point of domination, my strong wall.
Yeah, that's what I was going to call it, the point of domination. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to enter that room. I'm going to get a snapshot of this. Okay, there's nobody that needs to be shot here. I'm going to my deep corner because that's where my threat is. Now, there's also the technique of I clear the doorway. I have my long wall, and I can run the rabbit, which means I basically see the long wall. I travel to the long wall and go to my far point of domination, and now I'm kind of angled at the deep corner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And go ahead, Aaron.
Real quick before we go much further, can you expound on what is meant by a deep corner?
Okay, so a deep corner can be something as simple as open doorway, long wall here, so I can see down that wall, and then there is some type of void to my left that I am not able to look in and see. So let's talk about usually a coat closet, right? If I open the coat closet, there's two walls with a coat hanger, and I hang all my clothes and my jackets in there. I can see, as I open that up, I can see both walls.
Yeah.
Usually 4x4?
Yeah.
Normal,
yeah.
4 foot by 4 foot. So visually, I can see both walls as I open that door. A corner fed room would be, I open the door and I'm looking down a hall or down a wall, and then I have an angle where I have to cut into to go to the closet, or go into the restroom, or whatever you want to call it, go to the toilet, whatever. That is the deep corner. That it's that visual plane that I cannot see, whether it be 1.5 feet or 10 feet or 50 feet, depending on the size of the room. That's the deep corner. Now, center fed room, right? You have two deep corners. Worst thing you can do, because you have one this way and one this way.
And that's literally on the corners on the sides of the opening or the doorway,
the threshold.
Yeah. To your right and left of the threshold.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good visual of what because when you're saying deep corner, I could imagine what you're talking about, and it is what I thought you were talking about. But that's excellent. That's good.
Wall of threshold, I guess we would call it, right? The threshold wall, whatever. And then, so how you would handle two walls with a center fed direction of, we'll keep it consistent. Direction of travel is this way. I come to the open door. I'm traveling, and I can get a pretty good view of probably 75% of that deep corner coming this way. So this is still my unknown. I still have to take my unknown first. So what I may do is I may come up, take a pause, see if I can really cut that angle to look and see direction of travel, see if I can really see if there's anything in there. I might see a foot sticking out, an elbow, a hand, or whatever. If I don't see that, I'm going to take my hard corner to the left, or which would be to my left, to take that deep corner, because that is the most unknown. Because as soon as I step center, right, to enter that doorway, I've taken a snapshot of about 65 to 70% of that room. And I know fairly well that 65 to 75% of that room is clear. So my deep corner is my primary point at that point that I'm concerned about.
Excellent. Nice. Well, buddy, I think this is a good primer to, again, expose people that have never really thought about this, especially, okay, is this a corner fed room or is this a center fed room, etc. Even the way that the doorknob is on one side or the other, people never. There's so many people that don't even think about those simple things, and they matter to someone that is actually clearing. Let alone the fact that someone's just going to have to feel like they can jump in and just start clearing. Now, so that I love exposing people that. But so now let's kind of wrap it up with one little summary here.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
So once you get inside of a room, you have to also be aware of other exposure points, right? So it's going to be like a limit. I think in the military, it's called limit of advance, right, Eric?
Yep.
So, okay, so when I come into a room, if I'm traveling to my left, taking that deep corner, and it's the master bedroom, and there's a large bath off of that, like large walking, not even, just let's say a bathroom off of that room, I can't bypass that door, right? So now my limit of advance is the threshold of the bathroom. Okay. So I can do my secondary look and go, what I'm probably going to do is if that door's here, this is my limit of advance. I'm going to back clear all this, and then I'm going to get a deep angle and use depth of room to get a good look into that. And then I'm going to push into there from there. Does that make sense? So I'm using depth as my friend to get a better look and also to separate me from a potential threat. And then once I've committed, I'm going.
Okay? Essentially, the concept of being able to clear as much of that room or space as you can from a distance and angle, arcing, so on and so forth, getting visual as much of that room as you can get before you cross the threshold, right? To clear the rest of it. Yep.
We use the term overcommitment. Like I've overcommitted to the room. So now I'm exposed to a deep guy inside the master bedroom, bathroom, closet. Okay. So that dude's two rooms deep. He can see me. But my concern is I came in the room and I'm still looking at this wall when there's nothing there, scanning here, but yet I'm exposed to that deep room. Right. And there was a big study that was done where CQB, structure clearing, whatever you want to call it, SWAT officers are usually not shot from the first room. A majority of SWAT officers are shot from one or two rooms deep. When they make the entry, their focus is on the primary room, and this dude is 2 or 3 rooms deep in a closet, and he shoots the officers as they come in. Okay, so that still applies to bad guys because you're no different than a cop clearing a house if you're the homeowner, right? Yeah. He still sees you as a guy that's either going to put him in jail, put him in the ground, or cause him to get caught. So there's no difference. So you have to be aware of those limits of advance and depth.
Excellent.
Sorry, man. I'll let you.
No. That's awesome. Well, let me be clear. So I am definitely not going to teach anything about home clearing in my upcoming home defense carbine class, but I do want to mention some things about it for them to be aware of it, the seriousness, the danger of it, and that's stuff that need to be, if you're going to address that stuff, it's highly advanced concepts. And and I will definitely say, okay, if at all possible, you're hunkering down at a strong point in your bedroom. But we'll, again, I'll just keep it simple back to establishing, right, that the carbine's a good home choice, and that we're going to set it up for success, which would be first off with a sling, a weapon mounted light, and then get yourself an optic. So, Chris, thank you so much, because that's exactly all I wanted to do was give some of our listeners an an idea of the complexities of working inside a structure, especially solo. But again, I want to state very clearly, I'm not planning on teaching indoor tactics at this upcoming class, but I do want to at least mention some of these main terms and concepts for them to be aware of, because at that point, most of them will never have ever thought about how dangerous it is to go out in their home. They think, I've got a firearm, I'm good to go. I just need to be careful. But again, there's just so much more to consider. And I want to expose them to at least thinking about that. But that's all I'll cover.
Yeah, man. As you can see, this is a passion of mine. I absolutely love structure clearing, solo, 2-3 man tactics in a SWAT environment. I lived it. I breathed it. I still focus on it. It is just my absolute love in the law enforcement realm. I just think it's phenomenal to me, right? So yeah, it's definitely something that you need to practice, and I think Eric had a question or a statement to make.
All I was going to say is that folks that are out there listening in the audience, if you've never done this before and you consider this as something that you need to at least understand, you got to rehearse it, and a perfect place to rehearse it, probably the most important place, is the ground that you're standing on inside your home. Is that you should practice this. You don't even have to have a gun. Just walk your house and consider how you're going to clear your own home and how you're going to, using some of the concepts that Chris has pointed out, is what you're going to quickly find out. If it's the first time you've ever done this, you're going to go, oh shit, this is a lot to think about, and again, the point is don't let the time when you might have to rush to your child's room to secure them be the first time you've had to deal with some of this. You should at least have some rehearsals, and quite frankly, man, I try to do it at least once a month, is just go through my house and clear the home, looking at all my angles, clearing doors. And I do, like you mentioned earlier, I will close all the doors, and sometimes I will open some doors, and that will change that's what's interesting, is when you have certain doors open that aren't always open, it changes the way that you've got to approach clearing,
100%.
So yeah.
Well, just one final point on that, when it comes to rehearsal, I think to make it even more realistic, you need to strip down to your underwear and put your plate carrier on in your underwear, and unload your AR, and just keep it at a low ready, but rehearse. I mean, dude, train like you fight. Okay,
Yeah.
in your underwear and your plate carrier.
It's so funny, man. Like you guys both bring up points, but like, sorry guys, there's somebody at my front door and my dogs are going nuts. But literally, as I walk, especially when I got to my new house, I'm walking through the house and I'm like digging corners and shit, and I'm doing this stuff, and I go to people's houses, and I'll go into their house, and I'll like go to use the restroom, and I'm taking the door to the bathroom deep, and I'm like, all right, I'm coming in there, and I'm like, all right, how would I do this? And it, like, still to this day,
Boy,
man, I still
that is spoken like a SWAT officer, man. That's awesome.
I'll go into bathrooms at like restaurants, right? And I'll open the door and I'll kind of step deep into the room, and I'll clear the room deep, and I'm like, man, I am I got issues.
Awesome.
It's just funny how I still am thinking, all right, and it's not because I'm paranoid or anything. I'm thinking, hey man, how would I clear this if I had to do it? So I'm constantly running that in my head, like, hey, I'd take that step deep, come around, clear that corner, take it fast. And it's how my brain works in my passion for it. So,
well, what that reminds me of, Eric, and you probably still appreciate this, as a skateboarder, as a teenager, when I'm driving around town when I see structures that would look cool to skate on, I'm thinking about what I would have done. Nice handrails on some nice stairways. Dude, you got a bank on the side of the building. I'm thinking about carving those things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man, that brings back
still
some
do
good
it.
memories. Yeah, it is funny. Every now and then those thoughts will come to my mind too.
If you see some concrete embankment as you're driving around when you're 50 years old, you still think, dude, it'd be cool to do a sweet front side ollie at the top of that thing.
Well, what about any concrete structures that's polished concrete, man, that is going to slide or grind real easy?
Get a good grind across it or rail slide, etc.
Well, we just went off the deep end. That's fun.
Well, so let's dive into, guys. I think this is a good way to segue into our next topic. Now, another thing, Chris, that you can offer to our listeners and to this specific show is the fact that you started out in your career as a part of the DEA. Excuse me. Let me edit that. DEI, right?
No.
Damn.
DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration.
Yeah, you had it right. I think you had it right, bro.
Okay, so now I'm gonna.
DEI is that thing that the Secret Service hired a bunch of agents on.
Okay, so here's another edit point.
So
I'm gonna go back and then I'll bring it in. Okay, guys. I think this is a good point and segue to go into the next part of the show now, and to highlight what Chris has some expertise in. So, Chris, you started out earlier in your career as a DEA agent, and you've had a lot of experience working with the FBI and the ATF in those roles, and that has continued on as you have been a SWAT operator and lieutenant, that you've worked a lot with the Secret Service. And
yeah, so as far as like being early in the career, it was about six. Let's see, when did I go to DEA as a task force officer? Probably 7, almost 8 years into my career. I tested for that position. I got assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration as what they call a task force officer. So I did a bunch of narcotics investigations, had DEA cred, so I had federal credentials. Most of the time that I spent working with the FBI and the Secret Service was because of SWAT.
Okay.
And we did a lot. This county, between our last several sheriffs, are very, very at the forefront of some national news. We get a lot of VIPs that come through, senators, congressmen, people from other countries. So PSD work or personal security details was part of our mission set for SWAT. The most recent or the latest one was protection of President Trump, or former President Trump. When he was doing his campaign here, he actually came to Penal County and set up a very large fundraiser campaign in a less than ideal location, and we can dig into that if you'd like.
Sure. So that brings us to, I wanted to establish that you've had some experience working interagency.
Yes.
Between as a local source, local law enforcement officer, and working with the federal officers, and then germane to this is that you've worked with the Secret Service, in fact, on a protection detail for Donald Trump. Now, a lot of the main things that I want to talk about is the concepts of communication, how that works between local law enforcement and then on up through the close protection.
Sure.
And then, Chris, we were talking pre-show, and you having experience with it, you're seeing a lot of commentary on, people on the outside saying what should have happened, how they failed, etc. But you have the other side to it, so you can explain some of that too. But let's start with the communication ladder, as it may be called. How does that work at an event like that?
So, unfortunately, man, whether it's California, Arizona, Boston, Massachusetts, Texas, Montana, communications, and I think this applies in the military too. Maybe not as bad, but communication is always the breakdown. Comms are always the first thing to go. And a lot of it is territorial, right? Like Pinal County and the agencies in Pinal County operate within a certain frequency. Okay. And then you have like Phoenix and the Metro Valley area, they operate off of a different frequency. And unfortunately, I don't know what the issue is, but no law enforcement agencies either want to, like to, or for some reason have a hard time with inter-operations communications. Yeah, there's like mutual aid channels and there's patches we can do and stuff like that. We can go to different G deck, like we have a G deck, H deck, I deck, which are all these different freaks that we can turn to. So we have communication. But a lot of times, like if I'm leaving Pinal County, whether it be in a pursuit or some kind of critical incident or something like that, I still have to call and get authorization to switch to one of those decks if I'm going into the Phoenix area. Usually it's conducted by dispatch, right? I can't, in my patrol car, call up Phoenix PD and be like, hey, I need to use your H deck. Can I get on that? And I think it's actually Tempe or Glendale that controls the frequency. I'm not sure. I don't quote me on that because I'm not 100%. But my dispatch has to ask for authorization for us to operate on that channel, right? And if that channel is being used and we have to go to another one. So comms is always an issue, whether it be law enforcement, medical, fire, air evac. So the constant breakdown, and that's the constant weak point in our thing. Then you add the fact that a lot of agencies will not allow officers, deputies, agents, whatever, to go direct with the specific person I need to talk to, right? So a lot of times, if I can't talk to Phoenix PD, I have to call my dispatch and say, hey, I need this, 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 and this done. They have to call Phoenix dispatch. Dispatch has to relay it to the officer or deputy or Maricopa County deputy or whoever that I need to get information to. So guess what? We're playing the telephone game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So by the time it goes from me to my dispatcher to their call taker to their dispatcher to their officer, a lot of the information may be lost in translation, okay, or may need clarification, or somebody may not know their north compared to my north or where I'm at. So shit gets screwed up all the time. So that is the main failure point of what I would see as domestic law enforcement.
So,
well, Aaron, if I could just add something just for, and again, I don't have law enforcement experience and dealing with, the various communications platforms that you guys use, but there is some very close connections to the way that we communicate, in the Army or military, and it has some very similar parallels. And the best way that I can put it is like if you're a maneuver brigade, you're gonna ensure that all of your units have communications within those units. However, it may not just be your brigade. You might have a Marine element. You might have a Navy element. You may have SOF elements. So yeah, the ability to have everybody on the same channel is very difficult. Then add international partners in that. Sometimes those international partners aren't folks that you're sharing your encrypted communications with too. So what ends up happening is you have a tactical operations center that's going to have typically liaisons from all of those units. And so in some cases, that's how communications is happening, is they all have radio communications all the way back to that talk. And sometimes that's just the way it's done. Now, there's other times where they will try to tie in a specific frequency that everybody can go to. That's like essentially the no joy channel that, hey man, shit, hey, we all got to get on this channel to communicate. But with that said, yeah, comms is always a problem at any one point. And so, yeah, I can see how this particular incident with the former president had a breakdown of communications, but I still think there could have been, and it just feels like there could have been a better way to do it even still. But back to you, Chris.
Well, let me kind of focus it like this. And this is how I assume, and it may be totally wrong, but it seems like there would be, in general, 3 basic levels within one of those large protection details. There would be the local law enforcement support, and then there would be the Secret Service agents that are actual maybe within the larger perimeter patrol, etc. And then you've got the close patrol or the close protection, right?
Right.
And so just focusing on those 3 main levels, I would assume then that there's a liaison between each of those 3 levels. And
Yes.
and is that how it works? And then dovetailing on what Eric's saying, those liaisons, they're in some kind of central location where it's a star coming in, star coming out of communications. Is that the way it works, guys?
Yeah, pretty much any large event, right? You have, like he was saying, your tactical operations center or your incident command center, depending on what you call it. Usually, like SWAT elements, we'd have incident command, which was run by patrol, and we'd have TAC command, which was tactical operations. But I will relay, or I'll kind of discuss what we saw when Trump came here compared to what we saw in Pennsylvania and what similarities that are now starting to come out, which I basically talked to a lot of people about. And I said, I guaranteed these issues occurred, and we'll talk about those. So, yeah, in Arizona, it was he came in. The situation he was put into was picked by, I don't know who, right? But he was put into a bowl because that was the area that could hold the large amount of people. I think they said they were expecting 35,000. And they ended up getting that evening. We ended up with about 50,000. They shut it down at 35,000, and they kept another 15 to who knows how many thousand outside of the actual event itself. Well, the event itself was down where they hold Country Thunder. So if anybody that's listening has ever been to Country Thunder, you drive down this long ass single lane road and you end up in a bowl. It's literally a bowl, and you are surrounded by high ground.
So when you say it's a bowl, this is a geographical structure.
Yeah, okay. It's a natural structure, a natural bowl. So you have high mountains, hills all around you, right? And then you are embedded into like a very wide valley where they hold the concert. Well, this was just a campaign event for Trump. We get on scene. When I say I had a SWAT element there because there was no overtime approved for it. It was just a mess of an event, right? So we did the best we could. This was not during his current campaign. This was a year and a half, 2 years ago. He and my sheriff are fairly good friends. He wanted to hold a rally in Arizona, and my sheriff offered extended offer to come to our county. Hey, we have this place, we can do it. Secret Service does their event, their advance, and I believe there was just a couple agents that came out. We took them to the area, and I was like, "Hey, like, I'm not a Secret Service dude, man, but I've done a little bit of this. Like, what the hell were you guys thinking? We have high ground, and we don't have enough people to cover this." And he's like, "Wasn't our choice. We were told this is where it's happening, so we need to make the best of it." We get there, they start setting up, and my team and I are like, "Hey, we'll use whatever resources we can give you to help you with this." And they're like, "Well, thanks for saying that because it's only us." So basically his protection team from Mar-a-Lago, which I think was like, I might be on the high side, but 10 or 12 agents, and that's the high numbers, were the ones that came, did his advance. They were there with him. So you had maybe 12 dudes that traveled with him. I talked offline with these guys and they said, hey man, we saw the event location. We reached out to DC and said, hey, this is a mess of a location. Can we have extra resources? Can we get at least a CAT element with counter assault team for close protection, more agents, and just any other resources like some of their counter sniper stuff and their counter insurgency stuff that they have available to them for high ground and stuff like that. And DC basically said, he's not POTUS anymore. Make it work. We're not supporting this. Fortunately, they reached out to the local field office. The local field office was like, hey, yeah, we'll send you some agents. And then I think Las Vegas sent 3 or 4 agents down. Total, we had probably less than 30 field agents. And that included his protection team and the agents working the, I guess, the stage events, right? So those would be your inner close protection, but not his close protection. They had no CAT support, so there was no counter assault team. That's how our team got brought in as close protection for Trump. We had a CAT representative, but not an element. So basically, we escorted him in, we escorted him out. We were out of sight within 10 feet of the stage, 20 feet of the stage in case something happened. But again, communication breakdown, right? I could not speak directly to any of the agents on the stage.
That was my question. That was one of my first questions. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. So I had the liaison with me who was the counter assault guy who would dictate like, hey, if something like Pennsylvania goes down, he's going directly to Trump and we are to surround him, take care of Trump, get him out of there, get him to our Bearcat. And then other assault elements, like other members of the assault element from SWAT would take care of the threat if able. And then our primary focus was just to get him out of there and deal with what we needed to deal with. So from there, if I had to ask a question like, hey, I heard something in the crowd, he said, hey, this person in the crowd, I would have to ask that CAT member to clarify it with his people. So if we had to do something, and a lot of times our CAT guy was like, I don't even care about that. We're only here if something bad happens to him, which is cool, right? But then you had patrol deputies who are supporting the stage agents. And I think, man, I don't even think we had 20 or 30 deputies working this whole event. So between U.S. Secret Service and the sheriff's office, we maybe had 50 people working an event that potentially had 50,000 people in it, right? Yeah.
And with all that high ground around, which we know, in military terms, man, the high ground, you got to own it if at all possible. I'm not saying in every instance on the battlefield you're going to be able to. I'm saying, yes. That just sounds like a real shitty situation to be in.
So this is the other issue that we had, right? Because they shut the event down at 30, 40,000 people, whatever it was. The way that situation is the terrain is located, there's all these off-road trails. So now we had people driving these off-road trails and sitting up on the high ground. And the sheriff's office couldn't afford to pay overtime. The county didn't approve overtime. Secret Service didn't have the bodies. We couldn't get support from any other agencies. So we literally had, I don't know, several hundred people in the hills watching this event that we couldn't do anything.
All unknowns, right?
All unknowns. And all because there was no Washington support because of who he was, right? So let's fast forward to Pennsylvania. Everybody's like, oh, this and the local cops failed and the Secret Service failed and these people failed. Yeah, I get it. But having seen what they did to him a year and a half, 2 years ago, the first thing that came to my mind, and when people started asking me about it, they're like, hey, man, you did this detail. What do you think happened? I said, he didn't get support from Washington. I guarantee Secret Service said, hey, we cannot handle this. We need more resources. And Director of Secret Service, all the way up to the number one guy, President Biden said, no, we're not supporting it. And they're like, really? They'll do that? I go, absolutely. And guess what? Just last week they came out and said, hey, Secret Service was asking for all this support for this event. And Director of Secret Service said, nope, we're not doing it. I guarantee they did not have a full cat team there. I guarantee they had some snipers. And you can see that very clearly by once he was shot, it was your field agents that took care of him and get him offline. I think there was one cat guy that came up on stage and kind of held the stage looking for the threat. Mm-hmm. And then you had your counter assault snipers, and then the guys in multicam that actually went up on the roof that basically confirmed the shooter was down was HSI's SRT from whatever field division they were in. I don't know if they were local SRT guys or if they were from wherever in the country. So they didn't even have full counter assault team support for that event. They had to rely on other federal agencies. So there's this belief like, oh, there was this huge failure by the agents. No, those guys did as best they could, right? And I know we've all seen the agent trying to holster a gun and stuff like that, and I'll get into that in a minute. But overall, those guys did the best they could with what they had, right? And I know everybody's like, oh, the sniper flinched and this and that. Well, if you watch all of the interviews, the guy with the red visor, he's sitting there and he's explaining, hey, the snipers were focused on me. Like, and I'm pointing over to the roof like, hey, they're right there. They're right there. And I think, just my opinion, when that shot went off, that sniper that kind of flinched, he realized that's not the guy I need to be concerned about. Where's the shot coming from? And he started looking. Again, now there's a bunch of things that are coming out where they knew the guy was there up to possibly even an hour before.
That's what it appears.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that side of it, right? Because you guys, we've talked about this before, whether you're a U.S. Secret Service counter assault guy, you're a Delta Force operator, or you're Aaron, the accountant, if you screw something up or something appears to look bad, there's always somebody out there that knows how to do your job better than you.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of criticizing those guys, because I've been there with their guys when they were asking for help, and this administration denied them the help they needed. And I knew that was going to be the case once the information started coming out. So the little bit of information that's out there that we know the truth on, imagine what's not being told as far as what kind of support they didn't get. And I'll shut up in a minute, but now you're also seeing that, like Pennsylvania State Police, they were told, they came in and they're like, you guys are responsible for traffic only. Don't do anything else. Just take care of traffic control. We have everything else, which again is very fetish, right? They come in and they go, we're the feds. We're here to save the day. You guys just be lowly cops, and the federal agents will take care of everything. Agents for themselves are good people. It's the administrations that usually are screwed up, especially under this current administration, right? So yeah, I firmly believe that those guys were doing as best they could. They were put into a really shitty situation with really shitty resources, with multiple comms that were going off, and then probably some really inexperienced agents that were placed in a position because, hey, we're going to send all our new guys over here because we really don't care about this candidate. You guys just do whatever you have to do. And of course, look what happens. And some of it is complacency, right? The last time an actual assassination attempt was 1981 with President Reagan. Mm-hmm. Was it 81, I believe?
I believe it was 81. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of complacency too, right? Hey, we're the Secret Service. We're America. We're the cops. We got the president taken care of. And guess what? Shit like that happens, right? And that's why complacency is some of the worst things that people can do.
Well, so as I've listened to you and pre-show, we talked about this a little bit too. Second guessing all of on the outside, people that are second guessing the local law enforcement, the Secret Service agents that were not close protection, and then the close protection. So you're making it very clear. If local law enforcement was, let's just say in 5 minutes or so, right, trying to say, okay, local law enforcement, we see this guy climbing on the roof. Okay, we need to let the close protection know. So those local guys probably couldn't get direct communication to the close protection agents.
They had to go through dispatch centers or comm centers or tactical operations centers, which goes from me to Aaron to Eric to the captain or the agent in charge to the Pennsylvania State Police sergeant to the Pennsylvania State Police officer that's responsible for that area. 3 of that 5 minutes, I guarantee, was tied up in communications and relaying the right information to the right people.
But I could see there being a reason why. Let's just put even the actual limits of specific frequencies. But I could also see there being a good security reason for the protectee, Trump in this case, that his close protection, that all the other agents helping support this event aren't on the same radio frequencies as those close protectees, because hey, there could be some bad guys in the agents that are assigned there, right? Am I assuming that incorrectly? Are they with the close protectee? Close protecting. I can't spit it out. The close protection agents, would they kind of be in their own communication silo that probably others couldn't get within?
They're probably on a different frequency, and there's probably one guy that has dual comms, right? He has comms for the information on the outside, and he has information for the inside. And the reason why I would think, and again, this is speculation, that they would have their own freak, whether it be a simplex channel or a repeater channel, is so that in a contingency plan like we saw, when everything goes to shit, they can talk amongst themselves without the field agent that's 3 miles up looking at some guy going, hey, I've got this guy over here, I don't know if he's involved, when the agents who are responsible for Trump's security are trying to get him. Has he been shot? We need to move him to the beast. Let's get him out of here now. We're doing our primary route, not our alternate route, or we're doing our alternate route, not our primary route. That is the most critical piece of communication that can happen, right? And a matter of fact, during the actual shooting, which is normal, like a critical incident, when you're shooting, I'm not worried about getting on my radio, right? So all that occurs after, when all the chaos is at its peak, before everything kind of settles down. That's when all the chaos starts on the radio. So those guys need to be able to talk within themselves and not have outside communication.
That makes complete sense. Cool.
That's the way I would do it. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, all I was going to say, first and foremost, when I start making this comment, I want to state it with the caveat that I do not have direct experience with the various radio systems that most law enforcement use. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I'm assuming that a lot of the radios used are Motorola based. I know that's some of the most popular radios in law enforcement. Again, I don't have experience with those radio systems. I have an idea what systems they use, but from my military experience, some of those radios have some close connectivity, but they're different. They're different. But what I can comment on is what can take place is that there can be this set of law enforcement that has these specific radios that can be totally different waveform, or at least a different enough waveform that they're not compatible. Or we're talking encrypted communications too. Are they on the same keys? All that shit has to be worked out. And I mean, I have my ideas on how that can be mitigated, but I'm not going to say that right now because it just starts opening up a can of worms. All I can say is there's a way that a lot of this can be mitigated. But I can imagine. Am I wrong, Chris, in some of that regarding the radios? Because I have experience with the communications for certain.
you can have two Motorola 8000s that are programmed completely different that can't talk to each other. So
Best example right there.
You get a short explanation, 100%. Yeah.
So the key point here, guys, is that anyone that's, and frankly, myself, going back, throwing my hands up, why weren't they able to communicate? So, in other words, you guys both are stating, especially you, Chris, having been on one of these details, that it's not even close to as simple as someone just looking on from the outside thinks it should have just been real easy for them to communicate. In reality, it's a wall that needs to be climbed over, and it's not easy.
And if I can add one other thing, I apologize, Chris. There's also communications protocols, right?
Yes.
Because you don't just come out open on an open net and just start, with whatever the communications would be. You don't want to jump on emergency when there's not an emergency. You don't want to tie up a net that is an emergency with trivial traffic. I know I'm giving an overall basic explanation, but that's another thing. You have communications protocols and frequencies that you're going to deal with certain aspects of the mission. Am I wrong there, Chris?
No, 100%, man. And primary channel, alternate channel, contingent, your pace plan is in effect.
Bingo, that's what we call it too.
All of that is in effect. And then there's one complete unknown, right? Is Trump himself. Like, I met the guy. I know his personality. I guarantee after that, when they were trying to escort him off the stage, as you can see when he gets to the steps and his wording, let me get my shoes. Get that on a t-shirt. But I guarantee that dude was not like, hey, I'm good. I'm going to make sure the people know I'm good. And you can see them kind of like, hey, we need to get you into the car. So he's an unknown too. He's sitting there probably pissed off. Hey, these fuckers just tried to kill me. And you got a bunch of agents, most of them smaller than him. And I met the guy again. Like I said, he's a big dude. When I first walked up to him, I was like, this is not what I was expecting. I was expecting, like a skinnier dude, like maybe my height. No, man, I think he's 6'3", and he's a stout guy. So you get a couple of small female agents trying to push a guy that's under adrenaline, that's just been shot, that wants to prove to the people like, hey, I'm okay. It's not an easy task, right? So there was so many things that could have went wrong, that did go wrong for those guys, and the agents themselves are just getting crucified. And it's like, hey, man, you weren't there. You don't know the ins and outs of the political behind the scenes crap that took place between Trump's detail, the Secret Service, the CAT team, Pennsylvania State Police, the politicians, right? Because whether we want to admit it or not, the politicians will sometimes sacrifice things to be like, hey, let's do this. Or promoters will be like, hey, let's put him here. Everything's fine. Nobody's tried to assassinate a president in 20 years or 40 years, whatever. Sorry, 40 years. Let's put him in this position because it'll give a better view. Okay. And then, you know what, guys are like, okay, man, the boss says we got to do this. Now you're opening up a whole nother issue that they're having to deal with. And they were probably given the amount of resources, because realistically, there was only those two snipers from CAT team that have ever been talked about and ever been shown on TV. So is that all that Secret Service provided them for coverage? So those dudes might have got up and been like, hey, man, we're it for all these people. Let's get the best position we can find that's close to him if we need to support like close precision work to the man himself.
So in other words, they would have set up on that one roof they were at, as opposed to the other roof where this shooter was able to climb on. They felt, as experienced snipers and counteraction, that they were in a better position right there to protect him. Is that what you're saying?
It might have been like, if those are the only two guys that they were provided, and we don't know, right? Because everything's been kept so quiet. Those dudes might have been like, hey, man, this is the best area we have to kind of see everything. So again, we don't know, and for people just to hang these guys out, it really gets under my skin, man.
Yeah, and all I was going to point out, and again, this is based on Senator Ron Johnson's preliminary findings. From what it sounds like on his PDF, is that there were either two snipers or two sniper teams, and I'm imagining that two sniper teams would be a spotter and a shooter. But again, they didn't implement their teams that way by the way it looked to me. But anyway, I'm not trying to go down a technical because I'm not a sniper, but I'm just saying that from Senator Ron Johnson's information, it could have just been those two snipers or two sniper teams from the Secret Service. But that's it, though. That came from the Secret Service side on the sniper side.
So those snipers were actual Secret Service agents?
Yeah, the two guys on the roof in black were counter assault. They're CAT team snipers
under Secret Service.
U.S. Secret Service CAT team.
Okay.
Yeah, it's their counter assault. Those are the dudes. Like, that's the Secret Service's badass SWAT team that does all the super high risk, close protection stuff for the presidents, and usually, depending on publicity of the person running for office, right? But yeah, I mean, so you may have had, and Eric, I think you'll agree, you may have had a team that was close proximity to the president, and that other team could have been 300, 400 yards out watching the rest of the crowd, that was further out from him. And again, limited resources, man, especially the way they've treated this guy. And now with all the stuff coming out, like, yeah, we were denied resources. And then you had I think an agent, a pretty high agent, say that. So yeah, we asked for resources and we were denied multiple times, which is exactly what happened in Arizona.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think we agree at this point. The biggest, if we're talking, again, I'm starting to feel more and more less comfortable with even talking about failures. But we would probably agree that the biggest problem, we'll just put it that way, was the building that did not have coverage. Mm-hmm. If, to your point, if they would have gotten the resources that they had requested, that building would have likely had somebody posted on it or making sure nobody could get on top of it. But to your point, they did not have the resources. 100%. And that was the initial discussion I had with a couple of other police officers that have also been on Secret Service details as well. So, yeah. I mean, that's where the problem was that high ground building, and that was not covered.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just the state of the country we're in right now, right? Like, we literally have an administration that despises this man. Well, whatever your beliefs are, right? Mm-hmm. That despises this man for what he stands for. And that could very well go the other way. It just happens to be that it's the left despises the right at this moment. You know what I mean?
Well, you can't continue for years to say that President Trump is Hitler, right, and there be somebody that's unstable and think, man, well, I got to stop Hitler.
Yep.
That type of rhetoric that's out there. But yeah, man, they do despise him. They're trying to put him in jail. The same thing. It's not funny. That came out of a little bit of I don't know. Just, yeah.
It's funny to the point that we've gotten to where we're at in this country, and it's accepted. It's funny in a sad way,
Yeah, that came from a position of being, under incredulous thought process is probably the best way I could put it.
Yeah. Right.
Well, guys, we're sitting literally 3 minutes from 2 hours. So, right, guys, I think this is a good point to say good afternoon. This has been some amazing content. I think this is going to be highly informative, and it might quell some people's, especially the last topic here, it might quell some people's critiques of things that they don't understand. And I'll tell you, that includes me.
and I'll leave it at this. And I think both of you guys can back me up on this. You can be the biggest, baddest dude in the world, like trained all your life, but until you're put in a situation where bullets start flying, you never know how you're going to react.
Absolutely.
And that's just the truth, man. So for people who've never done Secret Service job, police officer's job, military's job, to sit there and criticize somebody from a 30-second skit that you saw on TV it's just not what Americans are about. Man.
Well, and a lot of those people never even been in a fist fight themselves.
Exactly. Well, I think we can just summarize it like this, guys. It probably wasn't major failures for the agents on the ground. It sounds like it was because of resources denied at higher levels in the Secret Service. That seems to be the most likely, and that's why people up in higher levels, they are the ones that rightly should be losing jobs. The more stuff comes out, but how much is going to come out, guys? How much are we? I don't think we're going to know if we get a quarter of the truth. I think we're going to be sitting pretty good.
Well, and any of it we may have to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Yep.
In many cases too.
Yeah.
Well, guys, excellent show. Chris, always excellent talking to you. I realized how long it had been.
I know.
And then it occurred to me, holy crap, we could have a great show with Chris because of his experience on both of these main topics that we talked about. So you guys have a good afternoon. Get some good dinner with your ladies. If you got a swimming pool like I do, I'm going to hit that here later after I play a little guitar. But love you guys. It's always an awesome time.
Hey guys, always a pleasure. Thank you guys. I love you guys. Hope to be back soon. And as always, if you guys need anything, please reach out, man.
Love you guys. You guys are brothers. Of course, I got my real brother and my other brother from another mother. So you take care, guys.
Take it easy, guys.
Bye.